what has been happening within the divisions that we lead is us actually trying to follow the law, and trying to follow even a law that the members on the other side, their colleagues, refuse to make the actual law of Trinidad and Tobago. And because of that, Madam Presiding Officer, we are not going to support this motion at all. Not at all, because it does not make sense, and we will not be a part. We will not actively participate in the minority council trying to hoodwink Tobagonians and take the resources of Tobago and place it back into the hands of those who are your friends and family. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Councillor Williams. I'm sorry, Mr. Duke. Councillor Orr caught my eye first.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. A good inning starts with the first step down the steps of the pavilion. And as I walk out from the proverbial pavilion into the center of play this afternoon, I first want to thank the Honorable Farley Chavez, Augustine Chief Secretary, for the confidence placing in me by allowing me to serve on his team. I hope that I would make many good innings during this. Madam Presiding Officer, on May 20th, 2013, a tornado touched down near Chickasha, Oklahoma, and began to intensify swiftly. By the time it hit the city of Moore, the wind speed was over 200 miles per hour, and the spread was a mile wide. Several persons died, and the destruction was severe. Now, while the eyes of the people of the United States of America was focused on that, the eyes of the citizens of this nation, Trinidad and Tobago, were riveted on events taking place in our national parliament. On that Monday afternoon, the MP for Diego Martin West and the then leader of the opposition rose in Parliament and waved a sheaf of documents and said they were anonymously received package of about 31 emails that supposedly implicated members of the then government in criminal conspiracy. That email thread was dated September 2012. In this nation, we know it as the famous email gate, and we know how that ended. Madam Presiding Officer, fast forward to 2023. A decade, and before I go there, let me say that revelation came almost at the midpoint of the term of the administration that was in government at that time. Pay attention. Madam Presiding Officer, fast forward to 2023. A decade later, and not far from the midpoint of the term of this administration led by the Honorable Farley Chavez Augustine, that the minority leader has come to this House with this motion. Madam Presiding Officer, my political memory is not impeded. In fact, it is still sharp. And I am reminded of the words of Walter Scott, Marmion. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive. May 2013, February 2023. What inference can be drawn here? Is there a parallel? I say standard P&M styling and strategy. Standard. Madam Presiding Officer, the 2010 to 2015 administration was promised by the political leader of the P&M that it would be hounded out of office. No cooperation was to be expected. So, Madam Presiding Officer, I look at the motion placed before this House, and in my opinion, the similarity is very startling. The shocking, brazen abuse of parliamentary privilege is being used here to make grossly reckless statements by the other side. Yes. Madam Presiding Officer, if there is a lack of energy for day or night on the minority side, it is not so on this side. Not on this side. If there is a lack of energy for day or night on the minority side, it is not so on this side. We will stay focused to the task.
Members, I'm not going to allow that type of language inside here. This is a sacred house and we are about the people's business. Please be reminded of that. Thank you. Councillor, or continue.
We will stay focused on the task before us to make Tobago the greatest little island on the planet. Madam Presiding Officer, I am convinced that this motion is not about love and care for Tobago. Neither its people nor the public purse. Madam Presiding Officer, I am prepared to delve beneath the surface and propose that the underlying factor at play here is the fear of the loss of the 2 Tobago seats in the 2025 general elections. The motion is for me the initial preparation of the groundwork. The ploy here is to mash this up and hope for a repeat of the results that happened when the votes were counted in 2015. False accusations are a political tool to steal elections. Yes. But let me remind those on the other side that fair elections are a foundation of our democracy. Yes. Madam Presiding Officer, allow me to strip down this motion. A. Whereas there is a public concern about the allegations of bid rigging and corruption within the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development. Bid rigging is defined, and my colleague, Secretary Faith B. Israel, gave the definition as contained in Section 4 of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act. In addition, Section 17(2) of the Fair Trading Act, Chapter 8113 Act of 2006, it is clearly stated that any decision or concerted practice of an association of enterprises, the object of which is the prevention, restriction, or distortion of competition, is anti-competitive and prohibited under this Act. A full definition of anti-competitive agreement is contained in Section 17(1) A to E of the said Act. Minority Leader, you get some homework. You didn't know about this. Madam Presiding Officer, public concern. How is public defined? How is public concern explained? Where did the information that formed the premise of this motion come from? Where can I, as a resident of Tobago, go to acquaint myself with this supposedly body of allegation? Where? Is the source credible? Is the author an expert? Is the information up to date? Is there an unbiased analysis of the topic? Madam Presiding Officer, fake profiles on social media platforms don't count as credible sources. They don't count. The minority leader has failed to convince this House that the facts placed on record this afternoon are proof of what the motion alleges. B, and whereas the Secretary of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development knew or ought to have known about these allegations of corruption, Madam Presiding Officer, it is routine law that he who alleges must prove. The minority leader seems to have forgotten that he must bear the burden of proof, not the Secretary of the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development. Can the minority leader categorically state whether he personally or directly or indirectly brought these allegations to the attention of the Secretary of the Division? Where is the paper trail that evidenced this? Where is the whistleblower information? Wasn't anything dropped in your mailbox? Nothing. Madam Presiding Officer, is it safe to say that failure continues to attach itself to the minority leader? Failure. The attempt to emphatically link the Secretary to the knowledge of the allegations have fallen flat like a dose of Andrew's liver salts. Yes. Flat. And whereas the Secretary's conduct in relation of the allegations raises questions about his suitability to conduct the affairs of the people of Tobago and hold public office. Minority Leader, I say, through you, Madam Presiding Officer, conduct is said to be the manner in which a person behaves, especially in a particular place or situation. If the minority leader is unable to provide proof that the Secretary was acutely aware or he was informed of these so-called allegations, what conduct or behavior is expected? The Secretary is not a madman. In fact, the minority leader's incoherent presentation this afternoon seems to suggest that he might be the one unsuitable to conduct the affairs of the people of Tobago and therefore hold public office. Madam Presiding Officer, the minority leader came to this House seeking the affirmation of a position of no confidence in the ability of my colleague, the Secretary for the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development. But Madam Presiding Officer, I ask the question, why the House? Is it because the minority leader is cognizant of the fact that a presentation based on lies, smears, innuendos, and half-truths will not lead to prosecution? That he will be safe from legal consequences? If the minority leader is in possession of these so-called interesting documents, which are truthful and deserving of the public's attention, then he doesn't need the privilege of this House. He does not need the cover of this House. He could spew the facts on Minority Report. He could call the media to any space, private or public, and share the information. No, but just like May 20th, 2013, the parliamentary privilege is brazenly abused to launch a cowardly attack. Yes. Madam Presiding Officer, the minority leader went at length to castigate a company called Namalco. But I would like the minority leader to check the archives of the Guardian newspaper. Look for Tuesday, April 26, 2022, and you will see an article which reads that the Estate Management and Business Development Company, EMBD, was ordered to pay over $427 million in unpaid fees for infrastructure work it performed on 4 residential communities for the former Caroni Limited, April 2022. Smoke that. Yes. Madam Presiding Officer, bid rigging is a serious offense punishable by law. So again, I ask the question, why come to the House? The House cannot convict the Secretary for the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development. Cannot. Is it that the minority leader is hoping for political conviction instead of a criminal conviction? Yes. Again, I want to make reference to a company the minority leader seems to be so in love with and puts it in the public space all the time about this roofing company being given contracts or contract road work. But what the minority leader fails to put in the public space is that the name of the company is Innovative Roofing and Construction Solutions Limited. Yes. And he says that the company is just 2 years old. But it seems as though the company was in business for a number of years, and apparently there was a change of name. If that is so, there is nothing wrong with a company changing its name. And if that is so wrong, I want to ask the minority leader. Now, I know people are saying same name, But I want to put it on record here and ask the minority leader if this relates to him. Around June 2011, a company by the name of Hampson Entertainment Enterprise Investments, an address of Dunvegan Road, Wim, Tobago. The name on the document is Kelvon Morris. But people have the same name, so I don't know, right? And the business of the company was said to be events, promotion, sports bar, rental of cars, and apartment rooms. Fast forward to March 2017. It seems as though there was a statement of change, and the name of the company is now Hampson Enterprises. And the nature of the business was amended to read General Construction and Equipment Rental Services. So this person could change their name, but Innovative Roofing and Construction Solutions can't change it. Right, Madam Presiding Officer, have the interesting documents been referred to the TTPS, the Office of the DPP? What about the Office of the Auditor General? It may have triggered a special audit, right? Has the minority leader written to the Fair Trading Commission to initiate an investigation? Section 5.1 of the Fair Trading Act, Chapter 8113 reads as follows. The functions of the Commission are to A, carry out subject to Section 9 on its own initiative or at the request of any interested person, such investigations in relation to the conduct of business as will enable it to determine whether any enterprise is engaging in business practices in contravention of this Act and the extent of such practices. Other investigations as may be requested by any interested person or as it may consider necessary or desirable in connection with matters falling within the provisions of the Act. Madam Presiding Officer, this house is for serious business regarding Tobago and its citizens. It is not for misinformation and unfounded allegations. The minority leader has succumbed to the temptation of making false claims, but this has backfired. The minority leader cannot come to this house, fabricate evidence, or by any other conduct, misrepresent information to falsely accuse a member of this house. The creation of this headwind of misinformation and deceit is nothing new to the PNM. Madam Presiding Officer, belief in misinformation leads to poor judgments and decision-making. It also exerts a lingering influence on the person's reasoning after it has been corrected, an effect known as the continued influence effect. And I quote UKH ECHO 2022. Madam Presiding Officer, the minority leader spent his 40 minutes rolling out his so-called revelations. But allow me to point him to Matthew 7, 3-5, from the New International Version. How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your eye? You hypocrite. First take out the plank of your eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Madam Presiding Officer, while the minority leader is here yarding out himself, the nation of Trinidad and Tobago is apparently burning down under the governance of the PNM, the party he's balisered under. Allow me to quote from the Daily Express of Monday, February 13th. Editorial headline, unaccountable leadership. And quickly, the latest prominent example of the state's double standard when it comes to following rules involves the Strategic Services Agency, SSA, which has been flouting the law for the past 12 years by failing to submit annual financial statements in Parliament. Over the 12-year period, the SSA spent roughly $1.9 billion, with another $243 million allocated to it for 2023. The fact that this has occurred across two different administrations leaves neither the government nor the opposition with any moral authority to complain. And I go down further. The state has even been known to interfere in cases where one of its own should have been made to answer an account, as in the matter involving the late Petrotrin chairman Malcolm Jones, who presided over the failure of the state-owned company's failed billion-dollar investment in the gas-to-liquids plant. Given the huge consequences of the GTL failure, the public interest required a thorough and transparent hearing of the matter, whether or not it rose to the level of guilt. So, if the minority leader, Madam Presiding Officer, is a true anti-corruption champion, if he's a solid voice crying in the wilderness against wrong, I dare him to comment upon national issues of corruption that have caused more than the raising of an eyebrow, especially when it reeks of anyone close or associated with the PNM. What is your position, Mr. Minority Leader? Speak. Talk up loudly and let the nation hear you. Madam Presiding Officer, corrupt practices and the PNM are like the subject and verb in a sentence. Complete. 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 Subject and verb. Complete. Madam Presiding Officer, you're talking about corruption? Let's go. In 2001, a former Chief Secretary of this Tobago House of Assembly went to great lengths to identify the serious shortcomings in THA's finances as inherited from the previous administration. As he said in local parlance, he whined on the supposedly sordid guardianship and management of Tobago's finances by his predecessors. The financial integrity of the THA was deemed to be severely compromised. Allow me to quote. What this all means is that the treasury of the Tobago House of Assembly has been mismanaged, ransacked, and pillaged by reckless politicians who have shown a peculiar dislike for even the most elemental norms of good financial behavior. Madam Presiding Officer, Tobago was assured of a swift return to financial sanity. There was a conviction that the technical expertise, skill, and goodwill existed for the management of Tobago's finances prudently, without waste, largesse, and most of all, without mortgaging the future of our children and our children's children. Madam Presiding Officer, true to form, promises never materialized when given by the other side. What did Tobago experience between 2001 and December 6, 2021? A rapid descent into the depths of financial quagmire, buried deeply under unprecedented recklessness and management. And the minority leader has the gumption to come here this afternoon to talk about wanting support against my colleague, allegations of bid rigging and corruption. When he joined the PNM last week, when he joined the PNM last week.
Member, you have 5 minutes.
Madam Presiding Officer, I continue. On Monday, October 23rd, 2000, these statements were placed in the Hansard record at our national parliament. However, I serve notice that I will demand accountability at every level in Tobago, whether it is from the public service or at the level of the executive of the Tobago House of Assembly. I will demand accountability, and for those who cannot account, I will support any move to have the full force of the law brought to bear on their indiscretions. Madam Presiding Officer, this statement was attributed to the current political leader of the PNM, the Prime Minister, MP for Digo Martin West. In the face of all the damning opinions from the Auditor General's Department on the management of the THA finances, the demand for accountability went through the window. Nobody, it mattered to nobody on the PNM side, not here or those across the pond. Free-for-all season was fine. Scandal after scandal after scandal. Madam Presiding Officer, we have promised injections to stimulate the orange economy here. And that should allow for a documentary entitled The Pirates of the Tobago House of Assembly 2001 to 2021. Madam Presiding Officer, it is simple. The minority side is bewildered by the development that has already taken place and the thoughts of what is to come. They're frightened. They are flattened by the bold, ambitious moves of the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries, and Urban Development. So what do my friends on the other side do? Resort to tainted truth, false claim, political misinformation. That tactic will not derail the focus of the Farley, Chavez, Augustine-led administration. Understand? It will not derail us. Madam Presiding Officer, permit me to remind Tobagonians. Tobagonians, listen to me. These words were spoken by the Premier, Dr. Eric Williams, on Friday, June 7th, 1957. My Deputy Speaker, 10 years after this resolution, on the occasion of the Act of the Union, the first gross betrayal by Trinidad of its trust took place. Tobago in 1899 became the most offensive term in our political vocabulary, island ward of Trinidad. And therefore, for close on 60 years, the government of Trinidad, up to this present one, none has had the opportunity of emphasizing its neglect and underlying the betrayal of the trust imposed upon it by the Act of the Union. Tobago, the legacy of the PNM is never to support Tobago. The PNM attempted to frustrate the creation of this institution known as the Tobago House of Assembly. Tobago must never forget the posture of the PNM before the Joint Select Committee in 1978 and its consensus to reject the proposition of internal self-government for Tobago. Tobago, never forget. Never.
Councillor Williams,
Tobago,
your time, Councillor, your time has since elapsed.
Madam Presiding Officer, I beg to move.
No.
Assemblyman Duke, please resume your seat. Thank you. Thank you. Assemblyman Augustine.
Madam Presiding Officer, I beg to move that the speaking time of Councillor Williams be extended by a further 10 minutes.
Members, the question is that 10 minutes of additional speaking time be given to Councillor Williams All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Councillor Orr, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Tobago, you must never forget that no PNM member of Parliament voted for the establishment of the Tobago House of Assembly to allow for Act number 37 of 1980 and Act number 40 of 1996. Tobago must never forget the walk out of Parliament on January 2013 led by a PNM Tobagonian.
How does Tobago must never forget get into an act of corruption and no confidence motion? My apologies. Madam Presiding Officer, want a ruling on 45-1, please relevance. This is going on over 20 minutes now.
Councillor Orr.
Madam Presiding Officer, I rose to speak in support of my colleague and his vision for the division of infrastructure, quarries and urban development, and by extension, Tobago. As I prepare to take my seat, I do so with full confidence in Secretary Trevor Williamson James and his ability to fulfill the remit of the oaths taken upon his appointment as Assemblyman and Secretary and the mandate placed on him by the Chief Secretary. To those on the minority side, watch him work. I advise you to stock up on Nexium and Alka-Seltzer. We move. Are you coming with us or not? I thank you.